Well, greetings, poetry lovers, and welcome to I guess what I call an unpacking of John Donne's The Flea. The reason I decided to do this particular poem among those that I assigned you to read, they're the Donne, Johnson, and Herbert poems, is because this one reminds me of my dear professor and sadly dearly departed professor, Alan Carroll at the University of Tennessee. I just remember him doing this poem when I was an undergrad, although I can't really remember what it is that he said then. I just remember how enthusiastic he was about all things poetry. He was a Shakespearean pretty much first and foremost, and so I thought that I would walk you through this. The point of this video presentation is to give you a sense of how to unpack a poem then, so that you can approximate this approach as you go forward with the poems that I've assigned, not just this week, but in the weeks to come. We don't have very many weeks ahead of us, so I thought that I would go ahead and do this. Worth mentioning is that today's presentation is brought to you by the Musgrave Pencil Company Tennessee Red, made of red cedar from over there in just outside of Shelbyville, Tennessee. One of the few places that still manufactures pencils in the United States. At one point, there were 6 manufacturers in Shelbyville. They're just sort of south of Murfreesboro. It's still known as Pencil City, USA. So there's your fun fact for the day. And as my backups, I've got the Cirrus 909, a delightful pencil, makes a nice dark mark, and then appropriate to the season. I have then the Harvest number 2, the Harvest 320. Okay, so let's go ahead and read the poem, The Flea by John Donne. Mark but this flea, and mark in this, how little that which thou deniest me is. Me it sucked first, and now sucks thee, and in this flea our 2 bloods mingled be. Thou knowest that this cannot be said a sin or shame or loss of maidenhead. Yet this enjoys before it woo, and pampered swells with 1 blood made of 2. And this, alas, is more than we would do. Oh stay, 3 lives and 1 flea spare, where we almost, nay, more than married are. This flea is you and I, and this our marriage bed and marriage temple is. Though parents grudge, and you, we are met and cloistered in these living walls of jet. Though use make you apt to kill me, let not to that self-murder added be, and sacrilege, 3 sins in killing 3. Cruel and sudden, hast thou since purpled thy nail in blood of innocence? Wherein could this flea guilty be, except in that drop which it sucked from thee? Yet thou triumphst, and say'st that thou find'st not thyself nor me the weaker now. 'Tis true. Then learn how false fears be. Just so much honor, when thou yields to me, will waste, as this flea's death took life from thee. So basically what's happening here is you've got Donne is presenting a speaker who is addressing presumably a young woman. And he is arguing for her to have a sexual union between the 2 of them. And if you'll notice that he couches his argument in concepts related to Christianity, to the tenets that surround things like marriage. You'll see he brings in the idea of the Holy Trinity in a few places here. I also wanted to point out a couple of things that should be fresh in your memory from having just studied Dr. Faustus, and that is that if you'll recall, it's Rafe who wants to be turned into a flea so that he can get down inside women's undergarments and so forth. The idea for us that we tend to think of fleas as being an infestation that happens when we don't don't slap a dog collar or a collar on the dog to rid them of fleas or give them the treatment or whatever. The fact of the matter is that fleas were pretty much a daily part of life for people in the well, I mean, as far back as you want to think. I mean, especially in the time that we're talking about here with early 17th century. And so for them to have fleas would just, again, be not that big a deal. So let's go ahead and unpack the poem, and we'll take a look at what elements that we can deal with here. So let's start with the easiest thing is going to be to start with the rhyme scheme. So we're going to go this. I'm going to go ahead and go out here in the margin here. So this is. So when we're marking rhyme scheme, of course, we're taking a look at the end rhyme, and so right away we have is pronounced the S is with a Z, and the S in this is a longer S sound. So what we're going to do is we're going to give this a slant, slant A. Then B is going to be the B line. Said, because it doesn't rhyme with the things that preceded it, so we're going to give it a C. Now, said and maidenhead rhyme, so we're going to give it a C. Then woo, okay. Now we've got a different rhyme there. So we've got the woo, it gets a D, to gets a D, and do also gets a D. So we've got this interesting loosely AA, B, C, C, and D, D, D as our rhyme scheme there, okay? All right, so if we proceed, and what I'm going to do here is normally what you would do in a poem is you're going to continue on down and take a look at, so I might give, so if the next letter in the alphabet is going to be an E, so if I were going to deal with this, I would give it an E, slant E, an A, because it rhymes with, because this rhymes actually exactly with the, it's almost like a refrain line to the first line in the poem. Then is, again, we have this business with the slant A, and then met and jet would get Fs, and then me, B, and 3 would be the B lines. Now, if you're going to be less strict about this, you could just say, okay, I'm going to just start again with the A since I have distinct stanzas. But just because there's an interlocking nature to this, and I think it's central to part of what it is that Donne's trying to get at with respect to the poem, we're going to go ahead and mark it as I just indicated. So it's going to be an E, a slant E, spare an R, do not rhyme exactly. This goes back to the A. We've got the slant A of is, then met. It's going to give us the F line. Jet gives us an F, and then me, B, and 3 again rhyme with the B lines up there. So we're going to get B, B, and B. So we go down to since. That's going to give us a G line. In a sense, it's slant because the I and the E sound that precede the NCE are different. So then we're back to B and the. So we've got the B line, and then we're going to have H, thou, and now are both H, and then B, me, and thee go back to our B line. So you can see what you've got here is this sense of the interlocking of the rhymes that roll throughout the poem. So if I were going to make notes about, say, some of the formal elements, I'm going to count, well, gee, how many lines do I have in this first stanza? I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. So that's not one that I covered in our presentation, but that's called a noncet, N-O-N-C-E-T, and it looks as though I've got 3 nonsets. Okay, now worth mentioning there is anytime you see multiples of 3, I mean this was a particularly important number at the time, so we're talking about now the trinity times 3. So multiples of 3 have a good deal of significance in this time period. So again, because we're talking about an argument that has to do with elements related to Christianity and Christian precepts, we probably want to make note of that. Okay, now I'm going to do something else here. And I'm going to just super quickly roll through how I'm going to scan this poem. Okay. When you're scanning, and by scansion, I'm talking about marking the stressed and unstressed syllables. So here we're dealing with the Accentual syllabic verse system. It's the one that that is organized around either 2-beat or 3-beat feet. You know from the presentation that the ones that I wanted you to pay particular attention to are the I am, which is an unstressed followed by a stressed syllable, the trochee, which is stressed followed by an unstressed syllable, the spondee, 2 stressed syllables, and then when we're talking about the 3-beat feet, we've got the dactyl, which is stressed followed by 2 unstressed syllables, and then the anapest, which is 2 unstressed followed by a stressed syllable. Okay, here, if we count the number of, let's just count the number of beats per line, and I'm just going to go ahead and do this real quick because I've already done it. Let's see here, let me just kind of get this arranged. So what I've got is first line's an 8 syllables, second is 10, third is 8, fourth is 10. The fifth there with virginity is also 10. I'm going to try to get that so that you can see it. I'm going to have to move this a little bit. What direction am I going to move it? There we go. Okay, here we are. All right, then the next line is an 8-beat line, another 10-beat line, overfed as our little note there. So, and then we have a 10-beat line, okay? Let's see. So now, I wonder if this will repeat itself. 8, 10, 8, 10, 10, 8, 10, 10. Okay, so here we go. We've got 8 and 10. Yeah, you just count these out. So let's deal with the top of this stanza. Oh, stay 3 lives in 1 flea spare. That's 8 lines. Where we almost name more than married are 10. This flea is you and I and this. That's 8. Our marriage bed and marriage temple is. That's 10. Though parents grudge and you, we are met. Uh-oh, how about that? Though parents grudge and you, we are met. All right, so there's 9 beats in that line. Now I'm going to circle that because it just broke the pattern. Whenever a pattern is broken, then you want to take a look at like what's happening there, okay? Because listen, Donne knows how many syllables are in each line. He can count. And so if he's broken the pattern, then there's something happening in that line that we'll take a look at here in a minute, okay? And so then, and cloistered in these living walls of jet, can you hear the rhythm of that line? And cloistered in these living walls of jet, almost a perfect iambic line, iambic pentameter line for that matter, okay? Though use make you apt to kill me, man, listen to how jacked up that line is in terms of like its rhythm. Though use make you apt to kill me, and you should be able to hear how that just does not follow the regular meter of the lines that precede it. Okay, there's 8 lines there. Let not to that self-murder added be. See how it gets regular again? So I'm going to make a little tick mark here. So that should be 10 lines, right? Though use make you apt to kill me. That's not right. Sorry. Should be 10. Sorry, 8. Though use make you apt to kill me, let not to that self-murder added be. It's 10 beats. And then in sacrilege, 3 sins in killing 3. Again, we get back to that sort of regular meter. Okay. All right, now, this is an interesting line. Cruel and sudden hast thou since. So cruel could be pronounced as 2 syllables, cruel, or as 1 syllable, cruel. And I am going to tell you that as I count it, cruel and sudden hast thou since. So if I give cruel 2 syllables, then it makes this into an 8-beat line. But I'm going to scan this as this. Cruel and sudden hast thou since. Okay? All right, purple thy nail and blood of innocence. So we've got 10. And the next line is, wherein could this flea guilty be? It's 8. Except in that drop which it sucked from thee. That's 10. And then, yet thou triumphst and sayest that thou. 8. Notice how he truncates the words here and with sayest to fit that 8-beat line that he wants. Fonts not thyself nor me the weaker now. So the 10-beat line. 'Tis true, then learn how false fears be. It's 8. And the last 2 lines. Just so much honor when thou yieldst to me, sexually of course, will waste as this flea's death took life from thee. So now we got 10 beats. So I'm gonna really quickly go through the scansion of this poem. So he's asking the subject of the poem to look, okay, mark but this flea, and mark in this how little that which thou deniest me is. Me, all right, so one of the things I should probably mention here is this. If you're unfamiliar with scansion, if you never had to do that in your earlier classes or didn't have to do that in high school, then let me walk you through the rest of the poem and the easiest way to do this. And let's do it with the polysyllabic words. So anything that's 2 beats or more, we're going to hit and we're going to scan those because they're easier to hear where the stress is. All right, so me it sucked first and thou sucks thee. These are all monosyllabics. And in this flea our 2 bloods mingled. Thou knowest that this cannot be said a sin or shame or loss of maidenhead. Yet this enjoys before it woo and pampered, so it's a trochee, swells with one blood made of 2, and this, alas, so it's an I am, is more than we would do. Okay, oh stay 3 lives and 1 flea spare, all 1 syllable, where we almost, nay more than married are. This flea is you and I, and this our marriage bed and marriage temple is. Though parents, some more trochees, grudge and you, we are met in cloistered in these living walls of jet. Though use make you apt to kill me, let not to that self-murder added be. And sacrilege, 3 sins in killing 3. Cruel and sudden, I already scanned that for you. Purpled, so there's a trochee. Thy nail and blood of innocence. Okay, so we got a dactyl there. Yeah. Wherein could this flea guilty be? I'm going to scan that as a spondy because he's really trying to drive home his point. Like, how is this? Like, you just killed this flea. Like, what he do to deserve you crushing it to death with your fingernail? Okay, guilty be. Except in that drop which it sucked from thee, yet thou triumphst. Okay. Triumphst and sayest that, yet thou triumphst and sayest that thou, sayest that thou, findst not thyself nor me the weaker, so trochee. 'Tis true, then learn how false fears be. Boom, boom, boom. I'm just going to mark this because they're just super obvious. Okay? Just so much honor, atrochi, when thou yieldst to me, will waste as this flea's death took life from thee. Okay, so now, what the rules you want to follow with respect to scansion, okay? And listen, it's a relatively imprecise thing, except for the fact that what you want to do in making the decisions about where you're going to give accent or stress has to do with what's going on in the line, okay? So where's the emphasis coming? So in an impassioned sort of argument like this, you would expect that there would be a profusion of stressed syllables, especially when he starts to get in that last stanza. You know, I mean, he's now pretty jazzed about what it is that she did, because he tried to stop her from doing this here in the second stanza. Okay, in the second non-set, he's like, "Oh, stay," as in like, don't do it. I can see what you're getting ready to do, which is to crush that flea. Don't do it. Okay, and so he tries to argue, and then she's like, she doesn't buy the argument, and so she goes ahead and does it. So we're going to go ahead and walk through this. Me, it sucked first, and now sucks thee. And in this flea, our two bloods mingled be. All right, emphatic line. And in this flea, our two bloods mingled. I mean, this is the point that he's trying to make rhetorically, right? I mean, as far as his argument goes. Thou knowst that this cannot be said. Another rule that you want to think about is this: like when verbs make an appearance, verbs are generally going to get stress, right? I mean, it's the powerhouse of the sentence. So again, when you're making decisions, look and see what's happening with that word. If it's a verb, chances are 99.99 out of 100, 0.00 that it's going to get stressed. Okay. All right. Sin or shame or loss of maidenhead. Yet this enjoys before it. Woo for sure gets the stress. Yet this enjoys before it. I'm going to give it unstressed. Woo. And pampered swells with one blood made of two. And this, okay, short word, alas, is more than we would do. I'm going to hit all those with a stress because, again, this is dismount in this part of the argument. Okay, now, oh, stay. All right, so notice how many lines start with a spondy, because again, he's even though he's trying to argue logically, he is still impassioned, right? Because I mean, he's trying to get this woman to bed. So there's got to be that sort of animal side of him that he's trying very hard to contain. Okay, just for whatever it's worth, whenever you see an exclamation like this, this is called ekphonesis. Ekphonesis is a rhetorical device that uses exclamations like this. All right, so just that's for your. Should I move that over so you can see it? There you go, with an E. Okay, ekphonesis. All right, oh stay 3 lives in 1 flea spare, where we almost, nay, more than married are. This flea is you, and I, and this. Our, of course that gets stressed. Marriage bed and marriage temple is. All right, something else worth noticing is how many of the lines are ending in stressed syllables. All right, so I think I mentioned this in the presentation, but when you have a line that ends in a stressed syllable, we call that a masculine ending. When it ends in an unstressed, of course, then we call that a feminine ending. But look how many of these lines end with masculine endings. Now I'm thinking there might be a little pattern here, but we're going to see if we can figure that one out here in just a second. Though parents grudge and you, we are met and cloistered in these living walls of jet. Okay, so as you know then, these living walls of black, right? Okay, so this is the color of the flea, right? And also the idea that that black, even though he says purpled thy nail, you know, it's that dark red. Purple has got to be a reference to Christ in a certain kind of way, right? Purple we associate with Christ Jesus. And cloistered in these living walls of jet, though use make you apt to kill me. Use being habit. Let not to that self-murder added be, and sacrilege, 3 sins in killing 3. Cruel and sudden hast thou since purpled thy nail in blood of innocence. I mean, listen, right? Blood of innocence. I mean, again, we're sounding like Christ is making an appearance here. Wherein could this flea guilty be, except in that drop which it sucked from thee? So one thing worth noticing is that quite often you'll have a we talked about comic scenes in drama and so forth as being a tension release. Also, when you talk about stress syllables and so forth, in order to set up emphasis, you know, quite often you'll have sort of a trough in an unstressed, which allows you to sort of kind of ramp up to the stress. Yet thou triumphst, and sayest that thou findst not thyself nor me the weaker now. 'Tis true. Then learn how false fears be. Boom, 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 boom. Just so much honor when thou yieldst to me will waste as this flea's death took life from thee. Okay, so now that we've dealt with some of the acoustic elements, so we talked about rhyme scheme, and then we have looked at a scansion then of the poem. Let's go ahead and take a look at any of the other things that might make an appearance. So this is not, I don't want to suggest that this is arranged in the fashion of alliterative verse, but there is a good deal of alliteration here. And so when we see it, let's just go ahead and mark it. So I'm going to say mark but this flea and mark in this. So I would go ahead and, like, for me, when I'm looking at alliteration, then I underline it, you know, like that. Sometimes I'll like put a little circle around it. Like, what happened there? Okay, sorry, I had some technical difficulties, and I don't know how this is going to work, and I really don't feel like going in and editing the text or editing the video. So, so what I did just a second ago was I marked the alliteration here. Alliterative verse is not part of this this poem's project, but you'll see that there's a good deal of acoustics aside from the meter and then the rhyme. So, mark but this flea and mark in this. So we've got the M's there. How little that which thou deniest me is. Me it sucked first, and now sucks thee. Just whatever this is worth. I'm going to circle, because he's using a lot of figures of repetition, and I'm just going to mention these. I'm not sure that I'm going to make you responsible for them. But this is something called polyptoton. And I mention it because, again, he uses repetition here as part of his argument. So polyptoton is the repetition of of words in close proximity that share a common root. So here, sucked and sucks share that common root. Mark but this flea and mark in this. It's a similar type device. You might say that this is something called anaphora, which is the repetition of words or short phrases in close proximity, things that are at the beginnings of phrases, clauses, sentences, and so forth, lines of poetry and whatnot. Okay? Let's see. So, me had sucked first and now sucks thee. You've got the little chiming of the E sounds. And in this flea, our two bloods mingled be. So you've got a little bit of internal rhyme happening with the E sound, flea and be. Here, we know that if these are medial sounds, then we would characterize them as assonants. But here, I'm going to go ahead and say that this is something more like an internal rhyme. So again, this is where you have rhyming words within the same line of poetry. Thou knowest that this cannot be said. So we've got the TH sounds here, with the thou, that, and this. Okay, cannot be said a sin or shame or loss of maidenhead. This device here, a sin or shame or loss of maidenhead, that is called polysyndeton, meaning that you've got elements in a series that are joined by conjunctions, and the idea is that the effect of this is to draw it out, draw something out. If its opposite is called asyndeton, where you divide items in a series simply by commas, which speeds it up. So if he had said a sin, shame, loss of maidenhead, then that would speed the three things up that he's looking at. Of course, maidenhead here means virginity. Okay, yet this enjoys before it woo, and pampered swells with one blood made of two. Just a little bit of the O and one in blood, the sound, okay, and the in of, okay. And this, alas, is more than we would do. So we've got a little bit of sibilance here with the S in this, and alas, and is more than we would do. Oh, stay 3 lives in 1 flea spare. So we've got a little more of that internal rhyme that I mentioned earlier. 3 and flea in that same line. So if you think about this, it's, again, we like the sounds that play together like this, but there's also the sense that it's a unity. So when we hear something and then hear it again, we as human beings like the pattern. So he's doing this, quite often, where we almost name more than married are. So if you take a look at the M in almost and more and married, so more and married then in this situation are alliterative, and because almost, because that is a stressed syllable, technically we would call all 3 of those words alliterative. If you want to be less picky about it, you could say, well, since the M doesn't live at the beginning of, or is definitely not most preceded by an unstressed syllable, then I can just call this consonants. If you characterize them either way, fine. I mean, I'm good either way, as long as you are sort of arguing for your choice. Okay. So our marriage bed and marriage temple is. So we've got this parallel structure here. So he's emphasizing again the marriage bed and temple. So if you take a look at this opening stanza, and I'm sorry, I went out of order here. Let's talk about the logic of the poem just for a second. Okay, so the thing that he's describing, of course, is the flea has bitten him, and it bit her, and so now because it's sucking blood, because it needs blood to that's its life source. Okay, which coincidentally is our life source as well. So the idea of in the flea are 2 bloods mingled be, okay, and the fact that this is just the flea's nature. This is what the flea does, okay, in order to keep itself alive. So as such, you can't say that it's a sin or shame or loss of virginity. So he's playing back to the idea of like what it is he's trying to get from her. Yet this enjoys before it woo, and pampered or overfed swells with one blood made of two. You cannot escape, of course, then the image of pregnancy. And if you look at the profile of a flea, I'm not going to draw one, although sometimes I do draw on these things. The sense is that the swollen, the sort of extended abdomen of the flea looks like a pregnant woman in profile. Okay, so you can see what he's doing here in terms of some of the imagery and so forth. Okay, and this alas. So alas is another example of ekphonesis. Okay, because it is a word that expresses sorrow. Okay, is more than we would do. So we and would here. Okay. All right. So he's saying that what's happening within the flea. And you should get an echo of the idea that in the whether it's a Catholic or Anglican sense of Christianity, and even I just call it Protestant sensibilities, that when a man and woman, okay, obviously when they have sex they're joined, but when they join in matrimony, then they are seen as one flesh, and so he's going to play on this idea as part of his argument with this woman. Yeah, okay. Oh, stay 3 lives in one flea spare. Okay, so his life, her life, okay, because of the blood, and then the blood that belongs to the flea, right? And then you can't escape the Trinity, where we almost, nay, more than married are. Okay, so how are they married? So he's using the word married here in a couple of different ways. Not necessarily through the ceremony that happens in the church, but to be joined together. Okay, so even if let's put it this way, even if they had sex, we're still, they would not be joined as in the same way or to the extent, based on his logic, as they are with their bloods commingled in this sort of third party. The third party being the flea. Yep. This flea is you and I, and this our marriage bed and marriage temple is. Okay, so you can say that he's, of course, having us to consider the sanctity of life here. Though parents grudge and you. So evidently now, see how he's revealed this information, sort of offhandedly, the sense that okay, so now we get this the idea that the speaker is perhaps not the most ideal mate or match for the woman who is the subject of this poem, perhaps because marriage at the time then, I mean, the idea of marriage being a joining of people who are quote romantically in love with each other, end quote, is a relatively recent convention. Generally, as far back as we've done the reading from Beowulf, so we talked about the Peace Weaver, where marriages happen between families in order to say heal the wounds of feud, or to strengthen power, like a consolidation of power. So one family has got, say, titles, and another family's got land and money, and so you put those two things together, and now you've got a more powerful entity that's together than the two things are separately. So this is, we get the sense that perhaps he's not an ideal match for this woman. It's not like poets make a lot of money. But, okay, so, again, this is if we're assuming that the poet is speaking for himself through the speaker, which we can't always do. All right, so, and cloistered, so this is, it's an awesome little play on words, right? The idea of cloistering being referring to when nuns are put in a convent, and I guess monks could be cloistered in a monastery type thing. But again, we have that echo of the religious idea. Okay, in these living walls of jet or black, though use, that's habit, make you apt to kill me. All right, so your note tells you that what he means here is by denying him sexual gratification. At the time, and I don't know if you heard this or not, but at the time, orgasm was considered to be the little death, And so so there's an echo of this idea, okay? But it also goes back to the thing of them being their blood being joined in this flea. And so if she kills the flea, not only is she going to kill it, but she's going to kill him as well, because his blood's in there, as well as killing herself, right? So this is why he says, "Let not to that self-murder added be," meaning that if you kill the flea, that blood that's in there is going to be gone. And sacrilege, 3 sins in killing 3. So again, if you follow the train of his logic, then he's suggesting that if she kills the flea, she is in effect committing suicide and murder simultaneously, right? Okay. Now, between you and me and the wall, I mean, this is a clever turn of logic. I'm not sure that's going to be all that persuasive. However, you got to admire the man's gumption in trying to make this this argument. So, cruel and sudden hast thou since, as in just now, purpled thy nail and blood of innocence. So he's asking this as a question. Did you really just do that? Holy smokes. Wherein, or like how, could this flea guilty be, except in that drop which it sucked from thee? I mean, like, you're killing it just because it took a bite out of you to draw some blood in order to sustain itself. You see the echo to what he said earlier about their union, being like the thing that's going to sustain him and so forth. I mean, you hear this kind of talk all the time, and with respect to romantic love and this kind of business as, if you leave me, it'll kill me, and all this kind of business, right? Okay, yet thou triumphst. Okay, so in other words, she accomplished it, and then you also have the sense that she might be like, gloating a little bit, okay, because again, she doesn't buy the argument that he's making here. And sayest that thou findest not thyself nor me the weak. She's like going, see, I killed it. I'm still drawing breath. You're still drawing breath. So what's up? All right, so again, he's speaking metaphorically. She's speaking literally in an attempt to torpedo his argument, okay? And so he's like, okay, 'tis true. So nice alliteration there with the "'tis true." So that you've got that the joining of those sounds which unify that spondaic opening. 'Tis true. Then learn how. So we have the false and fears be. Very musical line here. Okay. The long E sound in fears and be. Just so much honor when thou yields to me. So again, we've got the E sound in yields and me. Sorry about the phone ringing in the background. I thought I had that thing on silent. Okay. Just so much honor when thou yields to me will waste. We are with more of that alliteration. Will waste. As this flea's death took life from thee. Okay, so notice the idea is that what he's saying is that you will lose or waste as much honor sexually when we have sex as the flea took from you in blood, which is to say, like, not much. So he's telling her, like, I'm not going to tell anybody. You're not going to tell anybody. You're not losing any honor. The idea being that if we are joined out of out of love and this sort of thing, then how can that be a sin? So it's a marvelous conversation he's trying to have, and I'm obviously was not successful in his argument here, but this is just a marvelous poem. Your notes will tell you that that the flea provided a popular erotic theme for poets all over Europe. This goes back to Ovid. Okay, so from that era, you have this sort of conversation about the fleas that again are such a kind of ubiquitous part of people's lives, and the fact that they're basically crawling all over everybody. That there's the possibilities then for the sort of erotic imagery and so forth, or erotic themes for poets throughout history. Okay, so I hope that then this this helped you some. I suppose the thing that I'll just go back to a couple things. One is that when you have these like these slant rhymes here, I think worth mentioning is that when the rhyme doesn't follow what you expect, it's drawing attention to itself, and so he's drawing attention in the second line to how little that which thou deniest me is. So he's like underplaying it by highlighting it. He's saying, you know, this is not really that big a deal. Okay, when we go down here to this is the line that I guess I'm going to touch on here. This is line 14. Okay, though parents grudge and you, we are met. So that's nine syllables, whereas everything else is either 8 or 10. So again, because that is a truncated line, at least in terms of the 8-beat line, and it falls somewhere in between. So it's maybe the idea that 9-beat line is like the parents that are coming between the two of them. Okay, so if I'm writing about this poem, maybe I'm going to make that kind of claim. If my analysis is such that I'm going to focus on something like that. Then, so here with cruel and sudden hast thou since. So this is the line here, line 19. So now why would I scan that as being a truncated line? To accentuate the suddenness, okay? And how quickly she did it. Okay, so it's shortened that line as she has shortened the life of the flea. You have to imagine that in the act of having killed the flea, she's basically putting the kibosh on his argument, and so now he knows that he's dead. I mean, it's just not happening. Okay, so if you take a look at that line, then followed by that slant G, again, it draws attention to. I don't want to say he's giving in here, but it's clear that he is acknowledging the fact that she just came off the top rope on my argument here. Okay, so as you walk through the poems, all I want you to really look at is just to see how the various poetic devices that the author uses, how they serve the overarching thematic concerns of the poems. And I'm going to do this again probably for a shorter poem. Then of course you'll have a shorter video. So sorry this one was so long, but thanks for hanging in there.